Hey, and good morning, and welcome to today's panel on HR analytics and AI, turning data into actionable people insights. And what an important topic! And I'm really looking forward to the next hour's conversation. Um, AI and analytics are just so important these days, and organisations are really getting to know that and really looking at leveraging data to really help drive better decisions, more accurate decisions. So before we get any further, let's bring forward our panelists, please. Hey, and good morning. And I should say, my name is Rod Hutchings. I'm from Melbourne, Australia. It's now 1 a.m. here, so it's very early in the morning. But welcome, you guys, and looking forward to the conversation. To start us off, if we go around the room, and we'll start with Elizabeth, and just introduce yourself, tell us what really fascinates you about the topic, and we'll start from there. So over to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm Elizabeth. I've had a career of nearly 30 years in HR, 25 years in the corporate space, primarily in the luxury brand space. And then nearly 5 years ago, I set up my own company, Ludo. And we have a modern day EAP tech solution. And I work with companies doing fractional HR. And I go and speak in businesses about how to drive inclusive workplaces. And why did this particular topic interest me? Because things are moving so fast in this world. And I think it's really being able to know how, as HR leaders and how in businesses, we can truly leverage the use of AI in the right way, because we know human connection is hugely important. It's not about replacing that. But for me, it's how can we use it then to potentially actually free up more time for the in-person connection stuff within the HR team. So that's me.
Thank you, and welcome, Elizabeth. And over to you, Bo.
Hey everyone, it's almost midnight here in Manila in the Philippines.
Okay.
So I am Bo. I am the founder and CEO of a startup that is heavily focused on people analytics utilizing AI. So this is an absolutely interesting topic for at least for our business. Basically, we have built an AI platform that can digest tons of employee experience data and then deliver prediction to our clients as to what's trending around these sentiments and then predicting the likelihood of them leaving their organization. Just like Elizabeth, I have been in HR as well prior to me building the startup that we have launched. I have been doing HR in the space of financial service and professional services industry. And what we're trying to solve and what we do right now is really something that's personal to me when I used to do HR. I'm really looking forward to share and learn a lot of things from all of you guys and hopefully share a lot of things to all of our audience as well. Morning.
Morning. You really got me fascinated now to learn about around what your company does. It's going to be quite fascinating. So thanks, Bo. And last but not least, Kirsty.
Hey, good morning. It is morning here. I am in Louisiana, and kind of similar to everyone else. My background is in HR. I've been in HR 20-something years at this point in time. I don't know. I lose count. And why is this topic so important? I do agree with Elizabeth. It's partly because this world is changing so fast and trying to keep up with everything. And another piece, my background is industrial organizational psychology, which study the human behavior within the workforce. And AI is fascinating because I feel like we could tie this together and get better understanding of what's actually happening with the human mind and our behaviors that are, influencing the workforce. And so I am so intrigued by this area just for that main reason. And as for industry experience, right now I'm in the financial services sector. I've been in banking and in oil and gas as well.
Excellent. Well, what a great international panel we have. We're from all over the place, so that'll make it fascinating just by itself. All right, so I guess let's get started. And I might start the first question with Bo, since he's talked about his company. And I guess what I'm fascinated to learn is from your experience, is what are the most impactful ways organizations are currently using HR analytics and AI to drive better outcomes. And I'd love to hear, you can use some examples from your own business or what you're planning to offer. So fascinated to learn. Over to you, Bo.
Yeah, well, I got to tell you, at least for all of the clients that we're servicing right now, they are very, very concerned about employee attrition. I think if there's one thing that has emerged out of the pandemic would be, the flexibility of work and now transitioning the power from employer to employees. Employees are now more powerful in a sense that they have a lot of choices on the table. Like work now became borderless to a point that they can be hired by pretty much anyone in the world. And because of that flexibility that is now happening in the workforce or in the workplace in general, employers are now very concerned that a lot of their employees are now can just easily jump from one employer to another, which obviously means disruption in the overall service delivery and operations of the business, right? And so a lot of our clients are really going towards adopting technology such as what we have built just so they can monitor how the sentiments of their people are changing over time and use all of those data to empower their HR to transition from becoming an admin partner into a strategic partner. Because more than the data that we're digesting for all of our clients right now, we've seen a lot of employers being so interested around insights. So because they pretty much have data, right? Like if you are working in a big company, at the minimum, you are basically subscribed to what 15 enterprise systems based on our research. And unfortunately, these 15 enterprise systems, they don't talk to each other. As an HR person who's trying to make sense of all of the data that's available in the organization, you just cannot figure it out because again, they don't talk to each other. And I think that's a big pain that a lot of organizations have already figured out. And so made them realize that it's about time for them to adopt into technologies that will enable them to get all of these data sifted through.
Sorry, my mute was on. Okay, and I guess I'm fascinated in, do you see in your experience, and anyone else can jump in on these questions, by the way, I'm just starting on both. Can you see in your experience like particular organizations that are really looking for it, like small companies, big companies? Like where do you see, where's the sweet spot about who's really looking to use HR analytics and AI at the moment?
At least in my perspective, I've seen the big companies
Mhm.
adopt this type of technology. And the very reason for that is because technology such as AI would require tons, millions of data. And unfortunately, it cannot service a small company. And in my
Mm.
mind as an HR, this is me putting my HR hat on. If your company is just small, I expect you to be, kind of intact with each other, right? You don't need
Mm.
AI because you're expected to be talking to each other. But obviously, as the company grows, as the company expands, that's where things becoming out of hand. And so artificial intelligence is now becoming a huge help in navigating into all of those challenges. So big companies are the ones heavily investing in this type of technology and are actually the companies that are getting so much value out of it. In terms of the industry, we've seen the financial service industry actually heavily invested in this type of technology, and I'm going to give you one use case. So we're servicing a financial advisory firm, and this financial advisory firm has been hiring thousands of financial advisors whose main function is to build strong relationship with, high net worth individuals. And
Mhm.
because this financial advisory firm not having visibility who amongst these financial advisors are now thinking of leaving, they're losing billions of dollars in wealth under management. Because again, financial advisory is a relationship driven type of job. And if these
Mm.
financial advisors go for another financial advisory firm, they bring the same billions of dollars of relationship into that new employer. And so
Mhm.
financial service industry, specifically in the space of wealth management, are very, very interested in keeping track of how these changing sentiments of their employees are evolving.
Right. That's quite fascinating. All right, Elizabeth or Kirsty, have you got anything, any
Yeah.
experiences you've had? So,
My experience is a little different than Bo because I actually do come from a small company, and that's what we're doing right now. It's very, very small organization. So I am starting this whole AI journey from the ground up. So a little bit on how this works for us is, when we're initially doing this, this past year, I have been spending implementing software and technology and cleaning data. I think that's one thing that gets overlooked when you're in a small company. When you're talking about AI is only good, or anything with data is only as good as what you put in. So you have to first start with this data cleaning, which I have been spending hours and hours of work of getting this all organized. It is, that's the first step that we're trying to do. We have bigger problems that we're trying to solve in the financial services industry, just like you're saying. And I'm hoping that as we build these systems out, we're going to have the ability to connect. Yes, we're smaller, but you're also still segmented in a lot of ways. Even smaller organizations are still segmented, and technology is all over the place. So it has been, trying to understand and communicate with one people is a big key in what we do in AI. That some people are like, oh, it's just technology. No, you need to learn to communicate, just like you're saying, because whether in your small organization or a big organization, you still have to find ways of where this data lies, how it can connect to one another, and what purpose it actually serves into getting to the analytics that you actually want or need, are big pieces of that. And one of the things that my goal is, and it's a slow goal because it's going to take me quite some time to get to as this financial service company, is right now we have investment folks that we estimate takes about a 6-year turnaround to see if we actually made a wise investment in these individuals. That is a long lag time. And for HR, like we got to narrow this down. So using this new technology that I'm putting in, some of the things that I'll be doing is collecting data points on behaviors, like how many hours they're reading the Wall Street Journal, what kind of their GPA, all of these different predictive analytics, combining them together, looking at performance scores and then their IRRs and their different performance metrics, tying it together to see, is there anything that correlates to one another that will drive us, or drive hopefully that number down where we can at least go from 6 to even 4 years to know, but that's a long time for a company to make an investment on someone and then turn around and say, this didn't work.
And if I may add to that, Christy, I can totally relate on the tedious process of getting all of this data cleaned up. And I don't know how you guys are doing that in your end, but I've seen a lot of our clients, like the big guys, they try to do it to build a similar platform internally. But the thing is, it's the same thing. They found it hard to really clean up and normalize all of this data, because one thing that we gotta have to understand, if we want to deliver, if you want to bank on artificial intelligence as sort of like our technology to digest all of this data. If you want to get the most out of it, you got to have to feed it with right data and correct data, because obviously bad data in, bad data out, unfortunately for artificial intelligence, right? That's why the normalization of data, the sanitation of all of those data that are coming into the platform is a big, big challenge that a lot of organizations are facing right now. That's why we've seen some of them, instead of building internally, just go after a third party to do it for them, so they can focus on what they are good at. If they are a bank, they can focus on doing banking stuff, and then all of this prediction and other AI stuff can now be given to a third party who's going to be an expert in that space. And I also relate on the different data points that we have to look at. You've touched on that, Christy, because again, AI platforms or AI technology in general can be biased, and in order for you to battle that, the bias that you might encounter along the way would be to look at several data points. Like for us, we're looking at 120 data points, and you touch on some of those data points that we're looking at, like vacation utilization. How is that related to the number of times that you talk to the same individual within the organization over a certain period of time? So yeah, I just want to throw that in because Christy touched on a very important point around implementing artificial intelligence.
And Elizabeth, what about you? Where have you actually seen or used yourself, that's actually got business outcome versus this being a future state?
Yeah, and just building on what's been said about data, it is so important to get the data right, but also know how to bring different data points together to be able to then use that in strategic vision. And like any good strategy, you have to review the metrics and then pivot where necessary. And I'm sure anybody listening knows this, you don't just put the strategy in place and then go, oh, it's done then. You've got to constantly review these data and this metrics, and don't be afraid to bring in another data point, if you've got something else that's developed in the company. And I think because things are moving so fast, there may be new insights, new information, new reporting that you get a few months down the line because you've started asking for that feedback or creating data in that way. So it's a never-ending pivot of involvement of, does it align? Are we still on the strategy? Is the plan still working? How do we respond? Do we stop that, start that? And that for me is the power of this and these tools, is being able to really have quite quick ability, quite a fast ability to respond where necessary from the metrics and the information we get from AI. Whereas in the past, it was more of a, does it feel right? You know, do we were intuitively reading some things and sometimes taking far too long to respond, by which point it cost the company thousands, millions. So I think it's a real gift to be able to respond quickly based on this data.
Yeah, very good. Well, I think you've probably all started to answer my second question, but I'm going to ask my second question anyway, and that is, what are some of the key challenges organizations face when implementing HR analytics and AI initiatives? And obviously we've spoken about data so far, and obviously that is absolutely critical, but what other challenges, or you can dive more into the data if we want to be more specific, but and maybe I'll start with Kirsty on answering this question.
Well, we've talked about a lot of it already, but one thing in HR as an HR professional that I think is a problem when we're looking at analytics is the lack of technical expertise in the human resources world. As HR professional, our background's more on dealing with people and employee relations and investigations, and we're focused mainly on that. So a lot of HR professionals are not even fully understanding the technical side of this piece and understanding database management, simply just that. And what I would recommend is, as running an HR team, if you're wanting to go in this route, you may want to look outside of HR, hiring into your department, someone with an IT data experience, that background that is technical and not necessarily HR related, is one of the biggest issues that I have seen, especially, smaller organizations. Bigger, it's a little different. But when you're in smaller organizations, that is one of the huge hindrance, on top of course, your data being incorrect and all these different things of cost. And another issue that we really need to look at when we're talking about this is, employee data privacy and compliance concerns along with that. Which again, if you have someone who's got some technical background, they may know more about cybersecurity and those different pieces that can kind of better advise you and guide you partly through this process.
Well, and that's a good point. Particularly, a side point would be, I worry about people doing performance reviews. A lot of companies are in performance review cycle now. How many managers are just putting in some keywords in ChatGPT about their employees to get some, paragraphs come floating out, and that doesn't sit with me comfortably.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't do for a lot of people. That's why this whole privacy, as this gets further and further down, has become a bigger issue. And I think you're going to see a big, huge wave of cybersecurity in the future.
Yeah. And what about you, Elizabeth?
I think one of the biggest challenges actually is stakeholder engagement and employee engagement. So, we talked about the data. It's only as good as the information we put in or how we report it or where we get it from. And so getting the entire organization on board with this is really important, and where possible to be as transparent as possible. And I don't know whether, for example, in my last corporate role, we had monthly town halls, and I stood up every month and I talked about, taking this as an example, we talked about our metrics, our scores, where we were going, we shared them, we were open, and then reiterated the benefits from that and how it was driving the strategy. And where you can be as open as possible and really have it led from the front, and I'm not just talking about the management board, I'm talking about leaders in the company, mid-level leaders, because then we've got engagement through the whole organization, and that's going to help us with people, therefore, getting on board, using whatever reporting tools or putting in metrics in the right way. Because if each and every person understands the importance of the role they play and what it's going to give to the company, that for me is really powerful. And I think that's a challenge to, really get people on board. And I was going to say sell the benefits. I don't mean that. But when people understand the why, they're going to be so much more engaged with how they're using these tools and reporting things in a really good way.
No, that's absolutely key for everything, isn't it? You really need to understand why and then buy into that, so you're passionate about it and you're going to really contribute the most. And what about you, Bo? So you're a part of trying to provide services in this area, so you must see challenges when you try to go and help companies. What sort of challenges?
Yeah, this is more of like a supplement on what, Elizabeth and Christy have already mentioned. So number one, I can totally agree with the lack of technical knowledge in the space of HR. I gotta tell you, during onboarding process, I would have to paint a lot of picture just for HR to understand what we do. And so I firsthand experience how we lag in the space of HR, understanding how things work from a data analytics standpoint. And so I totally agree that I think it's about time for HR to at some point upskill themselves into understanding how data analytics work, most especially that AI is now being adopted in our space, at least get a high level understanding of that. Because only then that we're going to be able to, what they call this, motivate them to use the product. And that's answering to what Elizabeth said about stakeholder management, because I've experienced that too. To be honest with you, during the time that we are pitching the technology that we built, executives, they don't want to listen on what we do because number one, they don't believe that it can be done. But the thing is, once they've realized the revenue impact and the productivity impact, like understanding the why behind it, that's the only
Mm,
time that became more engaged in discussing the potential of the technology. So understanding the why, and enabling our HR people to really build a story from an executive level, because truth be told, executives, they only understand things from a dollar perspective. So if you cannot put a dollar on your proposal, they're not going to be able to support you. So that's
mm,
very unfortunate. And the biggest one is data privacy. So
mm,
this is big in a sense that EU is now working on some level of restriction and regulations around data being shared to AI platforms, which will absolutely affect the way companies making a decision as to what type of AI technology will be adopting. We've
mm,
seen that the ASEAN in the Asia region is also starting working on some level of regulations around data as well. I am sharing all of these in this panel primarily because if you are operating a global company, your data in North America you may not be able to share that from a technology provider in APAC. And so that your data in APAC might, you may be required to just keep that in APAC. And that may have an impact on the
mm,
overall deployment of AI technology in the organization. And I think that's where a lot of organizations are having a hard time choosing the best technology that they're going to adapt because of the regulations and the data availability for
mm.
those platforms.
Thanks, Bo. Yeah, no, you bring up plenty of good points there, and I guess one that I'll maybe dig in a bit further then on is around this privacy and data security that you just was speaking about and was spoken about by others. Is so what are some of the ways that organisations can actively try and safeguard employee privacy while leveraging AI for people analytics? So, what are some of the practical things that someone, if I'm a HR professional, on this listening to the panel today, what are some practical things that they could look at to help safeguard their company and their employees? Who wants to give that one a go?
I
I'll
can
go to Elizabeth. I probably haven't started with Elizabeth yet, so I'll pick on you.
Don't worry. I mean, I think when it's a global, if you're doing this on a global level, it actually depends on which part of the world you're in as to what the rules, the logistics. I mean, it is complex. Having done a project like this in my corporate life globally, there are different rules in different places, which is just a starting block, just to put the spanner in the works. But in terms of leveraging tools, it's making sure you have compliance, you do checks, you do this properly. You've got to keep checking because mistakes can happen, and making sure you're compliant in each market is, I mean, it's massive to make sure that data is held in the right way, and then communicating it also to your people about how the data is held. That's the law in many markets anyway, but I think that governance is essential. But having someone that checks it regularly would be my one takeaway on this. Don't just put it in place and walk away. You've got to keep on top of this stuff.
Very good. Elizabeth, Kirsty, you have anything to add? You're nodding.
Yeah. Well, when I think of this, I go back to my banking days, and just like you're talking about, Elizabeth, about checking, like in banking, you're audited upon audited. So when it's coming to data security, privacy, you may even want to look at hiring outside auditors or different individuals to go and make sure that all your checks and balances are in place, how you're securing the data. And it's always good to have someone completely outside of your organization looking at this, because they can find gaps that you are not quickly seeing yourself. To ensure that your data stays as close as possible, because the last thing you want in today's world is what just happened. What was it? Crowd. I can't even remember the company where Delta Airlines lost over $500,000 in one day, just from that whole data going down. So just make sure that everything that you're doing is checked repeatedly in different areas. Would be one great way to start.
Yeah. And anything else to add, Bo?
Maybe on my end, always assume breach, that your data is always vulnerable, right? And keeping that in mind will enable you to always think 5 steps ahead. Another thing also is to maintain anonymity. Maintaining anonymity, allows your participants to obviously share their experiences and information openly and honestly. But at the same time, if, let's say, the breach happens, at least the hacker won't be able to see these, personally identifiable information. So that's a technology investment that companies would have to deal with. But for me personally, for you to be very effective, you have to maintain that anonymity, not only to encourage people to speak up and share more, but at the same time to protect their identity, just in case, again, a breach happens while adopting this intelligence, analytics.
Yep. Okay. Very good. We might move on now. I can see we're already like near halfway through this panel, and like I think I had about 8 or 9 questions, and we've done about 2 or 3. So let's see how we go. All right. So another area that that I think sensitive and worth exploring is around just ethics and bias, and just concerns that the AI systems, can actually make the bias worse, possibly, unless we really put steps in about mitigating that sort of risk as well. I'm just wondering, anyone's had that experience or will share that that thought as well. So I might start with Kirsty this time.
So as for biases, when I look at data, one of the things that I learned in one of my programs I'm studying about data analysis is, you ask the question a bunch of times of why, which helps me understand and better drill down into this data, because it is true, depends on everything is who put the data in, who programmed the data. So there can be unconscious biases attached to everything. So as you're looking at it, you're trying to ask yourself every single step of the way, why is this important? And how does it actually impact the end result? One thing, like when we were studying this, I read a study where an organization was showing that it was male dominated. There were females, but they were not getting promoted and all of this. So they looked at the data, and hey, guess performance reviews actually showed aligned with that thought, right? Women are just not performing as high as men. Once you started asking, well, how does this connect to one another? And they started actually, the analysis went further. They realized that, hey, it's actually men that are giving these reviews, and these reviews already skewed in biases. And that was building this piece. Once they got that understanding, they were able to go back, redesign, and draw better data. And those are the things that when you're looking at every single piece, you need to look at and ask those specific questions, because there is a lot of times a story behind the data that you need to fully understand. And the best way is to ask those simple questions.
Now that's really some great examples. Elizabeth, Bo, what anything to add on this topic?
Just building really on what Christy said. It's about how you're asking the questions and what the output is that you want in the first place. Because if that's bias, and the person who's programming that in or asking for those metrics is coming at it with a bias before you've even begun, then it's going to come from there. So verifying is it looking at it with somebody else, making sure you're getting a proper diverse opinion on the data you're actually trying to get out of it, for me would be really important. If you've got a bunch of people that are all, let's say, white middle-class men sat around the table, are we going to have the right dynamic and be asking the right questions?
A good point.
So for me, at least from in the space of artificial intelligence, bias is a big topic that we are always discussing, right? Because obviously, artificial intelligence will just make an interpretation on whatever you feed the algorithm. In our over a year of R&D, at least for the algorithm that we built, we figured that the smaller your data sets, the more bias that you can get out of it. But as you
Mm,
expand that data set, the more data that you're feeding the algorithm, you actually lessen that bias. And that's also the same premise that I follow when I said that unfortunately, at least for the technology that we built, we're not going to be able to service the small guys because
mm,
again, we might become biased in delivering the insights and the analytics behind it because of the small data sets that they have. Because
mm,
again, for us to avoid bias, we gotta have to feed in tons of data, millions of data, so the algorithm will be able to define specifically what are the type of goals that you wanted to achieve from all of those data that you're feeding um, the the algorithm. And I think that goes to the problem where a lot of organizations are facing right now also where they would have to deal with multiple systems that are not talking to each other. So
mm,
at the beginning we would always tell clients that they gotta have to get all of these systems in one bucket. That way you can have big sets of data and then let the algorithm identify the trends and commonalities in all of those data uh, inside all of those systems. So I guess it's just plug in the biggest data that you have in there so you can avoid the bias. And I agree, the type of questions that we're asking, those must be fully vetted by HR. We
mm,
believe that HR is fully equipped to identify, questions that are biased. Because again, if you feed in biased questions, unfortunately, algorithm will just give you biased answers as well.
mm. Nice. Many good golden nuggets in what you just shared then. And look, like, and a very simple example is, again, if we just go to, I mean, this is not people analytics necessarily, but using ChatGPT. If someone has a 20-page resume of all their projects they've done and a lot of detail about them, and and um, and you ask ChatGPT to improve their resume for a particular role versus someone who gives you a one-page resume and do the same thing,
Yeah,
obviously it's just not going to work, is it? So there's going to be bias inaccuracies, and so that's just a sort of a graphic example that
yeah.
obviously plays into all the other scenarios with
Like
real analytics.
it's like asking someone to paint a picture and only giving that person four colors, right? But if you
Mm,
can give that individual thousands of colors, you can expect, an abstract or a much better painting, after the session. So it's like that too. So
yeah.
yeah,
All right. And then in terms of the ethics element of the question, an area that I just curious on in your experience is how transparent companies are where they're using people or AI driven people analytics. Like, is that something being spoken about in the companies that you're involved with? I guess, and again, the question's to everybody. So, is there much talk about using the analytics with the actual employees?
I will
Is
be
that something?
very honest with you. I've seen some
Yeah.
companies not disclosing the
Mm,
utilization of AI in their organization, and I think that's the very reason why GDPR is now being revised
mhm,
to compel companies to make full disclosure as to what are these information that are being fed into AI and how long those information will be kept in there.
mm,
Because unfortunately, yeah, we've seen companies that are not disclosing that. Um, so that's just so unfortunate. And for whatever reason, well, I don't know. Um, Probably because of regulations too. But yeah,
mm.
we've seen companies that are not disclosing it fully.
Yeah. All right. So we've spoken about why we want to do it. We've spoken about some of the challenges. Um, I'm just wondering if you could just share. I mean, we've probably spoken about a bit about this next question in a way as well. But how can organisations, how can we help prepare our HR professionals, our HR teams to actually work alongside these AI projects and AI effectively? Like, how do we actually enable our HR professionals?
For me, it's don't be scared. Be brave. And if you're not sure, if there's a business that you're working with already that's maybe developed an AI tool, or you've heard about something, it's totally okay to get that business in and get them to give you a demo and tell you it's not going to cost you anything. It's nothing to be scared of. But I would say just be hungry to learn and understand how it's going to help your business, because I think AI can be a bit scary for people, and not for everyone. I'm speaking just for some people, but they think, oh God, I don't know how that's going to work, and it's too hard to implement. And so there's already resistance before you've even begun to understand and learn how it's going to help your company. I certainly can think about my beginning of the journey on this, and the first time I was introduced a company called Qualtrics, I was like, what? It can do that? And I was blown away. I'm literally blown away. That was my first experience of this a few years back. So I would just invite you to have a look online, think about who you're already working with that maybe is developing a tool, because many of the big HRIS companies are doing such interesting stuff. Talk to Bo about his company, obviously. But I think just being brave and exploring would be my absolute invitation. And then you'll start getting on board how it can work in your business.
Yeah. Anything else, Bo or Kirsty, on this one?
Yeah, I think for, HR, the reason I kind of fell in, or the recent years have found this new love for data analytics, is because partly some of my background, which is I grew up in the age where my dad had a computer for a long time, way before computers was popular. And so I had learned already the basics of computer programming and all of this database management, took courses in college. And then having studied IO psychology, that background in statistics. So I took several years of that, has helped me to understand all what we're discussing today. And I think as HR professionals, if you want to even explore this area, I say start small, where you're just looking at simply a database management class and like a statistics 101. You don't even have to go that far, because now technology and AI can pretty much do a lot of this work for you. You don't have to be a mathematical genius to do it anymore. But having an understanding on the basics, that foundation, will help build from there.
All right. Well, I might move us on. And sorry, you got to say something, Bo?
No, I was just saying, change the mindset. I've seen a lot of HR thinking that HR will replace their job. No, AI is an enabler. It will actually, make you better at what you do. Just like what I'm always telling people, it will transition your function from an admin HR into a strategic HR, and that's all what we want it to be, right? So yeah, just don't be afraid of AI, and look at it, change the mindset, and look at it as an enabler rather than something that will replace your function.
And that leads me into my next question, actually, and that's around how we can use people analytics and AI with employee development. So how can, I don't think we've spoken about this use case, but how AI and people analytics can be used to identify learning and development opportunities, sort of then tailored to the individuals in the organization to help them, grow and be better. Is that something that you've got experience with and see that use case in action? Who would like that one?
Well, I'm going to share with you the trends that we've seen. Like we've seen that, at least for the sector that we're servicing right now, majority of the resignation that have happened, at least for 2023, was heavily driven by mismatch on skills. So they were hired for a function that is not aligned to the skills that they have amassed over the years that they've been working. And so I personally feel that artificial intelligence will be able to fill that gap. Like imagine AI identifying the skills that are needed for that specific function and matching those skills from the pool of talents, whether they are internal or external, that you already have, minimizing the risk of them, not becoming a performer in the function that you're going to be giving to them. So I think that's one case that's going to be very good, by specifically identifying skill sets that will be perfect for a specific function that the company will be hiring for.
Yeah. Kirsty, Elizabeth, you got any examples of using AI with learning and development?
I do not, actually. This is not my little area of expertise.
Yeah.
Only on a very small scale of just identifying skills gaps. So measuring of, and tying it into JDs. And I know it's more than that, but just really identifying where there might be gaps in the business. And actually, we tied it into a personality profiling tool. There was another part that came in if X job needs X and we have this, where's our gap? What does that look like? But it was done on a very small scale. It was more of a kind of pilot, but interesting to see what it threw out. And there was some really helpful just indicators, really, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
Another that I'm going to share, Rod, attrition. Like if you are in a type of industry where you do volume hiring because your business is heavily driven by FTEs, full-time employees, imagine AI telling you that, hey, within 3 months, 6 months, you're going to be experiencing this volume of resignation. That will enable you to, number one, work with HR on mitigating strategies. Or number two, if you cannot find anything that will help you mitigate the resignation, maybe start rallying your recruitment team, because AI is also telling you that it takes X number of days for you to find this kind of talent. So that's another use case for AI too. So attrition volume forecasting, skills matching. We've seen flexible benefits provisioning being fueled by AI too. So imagine AI having access to the profile and demographics of your employees. Gone are the days that you are offering one size fits all benefits to all of your employees, because now AI can tell you that, hey, this is the demographic of this person, and based on the data that we have digested, these are the type of benefits that will appeal to them. And again, that will drive extended retention for that specific employee profile. So instead of you HR dealing with Excel file, several systems that you have to read out, AI will now just do that for you, and all you have to do is to look at it at a glance and get insights out of it.
Some great points, and you keep jumping onto my next question in a way, which is really good actually, because I wanted to really just focus on how AI can be used to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. And so that's, I think you started to really touch on some of those elements in that last answer. Anyone got any thoughts on that? How we can?
Oh, Mimi, this is so my jam. I want to jump in on this one. I'm like, because this is so much of the work that we do at Ludo, and this is massive. You're identifying, things like potential unconscious biases in job descriptions. Analyzing. We know that a job description that's put out there in most cases doesn't necessarily invite women to apply in the same way as men might, and that's just one tiny example of how bias is happening. So how do we use it to create more inclusive job descriptions and flush out when they are, they're biased? The same with candidate adverts, or shortlistings of candidates. Like, what's going on there? There's different ways in which we can really ensure that we are pulling out some of the discrimination that could be taking place. So I think this is massive. And then when you take it, and that's in the application process, but then when you take it into the employee life cycle, how are we driving truly inclusive workplaces and looking at diversity metrics and being able to get, again, we're back to the data point, as long as the data we're gathering is right, but that can provide insights into representation, into equity within the business. And so there are ways in which it can really help there too. And this for me is like up there as being one of the most important things we can do to drive truly inclusive and diverse workplaces. So I piled straight in there. I was like, I want to talk about this. This is a great question.
Kirsty, what about yourself?
No, it really is a great question. A lot of my work has been on the compensation side. So when you're looking at pay equity analysis on this area, that has been one of my biggest drivers. And technology now today, depending on, again, software that you use, can do a lot of the work for you and the heavy lifting. But it does help to even look, just like Elizabeth was saying, every single part of everything we do in HR does have DI in it, and it does have data analytics. So I think there's so many different areas that you can mark, from recruitment all the way to exit surveys and understanding why people are leaving, and reading in between that, using AI to kind of read the sentiment in those exit interviews and understanding really what's the underlining message. Because a lot of times, even when people leave, they don't really tell you the full truth. And that's where AI can get handy and kind of weed this piece through and to help you understand what they're actually indicating in these pieces. And then just looking again, like turnover rates, all your basic stuff, but you have to combine everything together to fully understand the bigger picture of DI. So it's so many different metric points that you actually have to invest in.
No, great points. All right. Now, I guess looking ahead, and like I'm not sure we've fully got there yet, but what emerging trends or future possibilities are there with analytics and AI, and how what can we see in the next I'll say next 2 years, because if say 5 years, it's just way too far out. But the next 2 years, what do you think the companies that you're in, or what big companies will be doing with AI to make them be able to service their employees better and their customers better?
I'll jump in. One of the things that I have seen on the benefit side is personalizing benefits. As companies are getting bigger, the bigger organizations, people actually want something that's personalized to them. And now vendors are getting into that game real quick, your brokers, all of this, where they are able now to build in these programs using AI chatbots and be able to go, okay, in this particular person's circumstance, they have a child that has a disability or whatever, and then they can walk through step by step in finding the best piece for them. This helps their work-life balance. It touches all those areas. So I think in the next 2 years, you're going to see a bigger trend on that. You're going to also see a bigger trend on the benefit side of cost transparencies and hospitalizations, all of this, which is going to help drive or impact, hopefully, the cost on your healthcare. So I'm very intrigued in those areas of what's going to happen in AI and how is that going to impact us as HR professionals when we're making those decisions that influence 40, 50, all our company's lives in the organization.
Yeah. Elizabeth?
I think for me, it's workforce planning. I mean, we're already doing it, but I think this is going to be really game-changing for the HR space going forward. But I think this predictive analytics piece, I mean, in my experience, and it's not been, I haven't been widely using AI, but in my experience, it's kind of interpreting what we've got. But actually the predictive and the forward-looking stuff, I think we're having much more of a shift towards that now, which is really exciting because it helps us form plans and write strategies and, really get behind what we think will come.
And what about you, Bo? What are you targeting, I guess? And since your company's right in this, you must be having a plan of what you see you can going to tackle in the next 2 years.
So predictive AI is now happening in the next, and then generative AI. These are the two things that we are seeing to be emerging. So I hope there are employees listening to us in this session. So gone are the days that you're still going to have that 1-800 phone to ask about your benefits. You're now going to be dealing with chatbots that are going to be connected to your HR knowledge base, because now your HR team will be becoming strategic in a sense that they will now be upskilled by their employers. We've seen a lot of companies now acknowledging that their HR people must now be upskilled in a sense that they will understand at least the high level technicalities of artificial intelligence in the workplace. So that's Gen AI. And then predictive AI, we are now seeing this being implemented in HR, not just in HR actually, but also in operations, like projecting what will be the potential impact on their productivity and revenue, so they can plan for what might be a potential disruption in their overall operation. And again, predictive in AI in a sense that they want to make sure that they are they have exact pool of talents, just in case there will be potential resignations that might happen in their organization. So these are the two things that's going to be emerging, at least for the next couple of years, that we are seeing.
Yeah, I think that's really important, really about measuring success, and that can really be assisted by AI, again, with this people analytics stuff. And I guess the question I'll ask about that topic then, to even dive a bit deeper, would be, what sort of, if I'm a HR professional, what sort of key metrics, what sort of benchmarks can I be looking at to really track where is our organization in this AI journey? And then if I've implemented it already, what sort of measures of success of AI should I be really reporting on and talking about with the broader organization and leadership to really showcase how successful or otherwise the organization is in this space. So how do we bring it down to metrics, data, I guess, in a way, so to actually help on the journey and help sell the journey? Who wants to jump on this one?
At least for metrics, well, I gotta tell you, it's still pretty dynamic at this point because AI is pretty much still new, I must say, and so there's no definite metric that a lot of organizations are following, like a one size fits all metric, right? But in terms of measuring the success of an AI deployment, it is always dependent on the type of AI technology that you are using. Like a good example, generative AI. We've seen some companies measuring it based on utilization, like how many of their people are actually utilizing the chatbot that they have deployed, and how what's the accuracy of these of these answers being provided to those people that are utilizing it. For predictive AI, we've seen them looking at, so this is surprising, not accuracy, but rather precision. So because accuracy is more of like telling them we predicted 500 over 1000, how many of the 500 happened? Precision, on the other hand, is talking about the true positive and the false positive and all of those things. So it is always dependent on the type of AI technology that they are deploying. So it's pretty fluid, I must say.
Yeah. And maybe that's part of it, though. Just like, are we using generative? Are we using predictive? Are we using it for employment versus using it for development
Yeah.
versus financial benefits? So, like, there's those sort of just high-level measures that you could identify to actually look at where are we as a company on our journey to really leverage
Yeah.
what's available and what couldn't be available.
That's why the first thing that a company would have to deal to knock off if they are looking on deploying artificial intelligence in their organization is to really define what are the things that they wanted to get out of it, right?
Hmm.
So if you are looking on addressing unwanted resignation in your organization, then define a metric behind that. And that's also the very reason why it's about time for HR to have their own data analyst for the team or a data scientist for the team, because I personally feel that HR will be more empowered if they have an expert in their space that's going to be dedicated for their function rather than they are asking another department to share that resource to them. So
Hmm.
that's an additional investment that I feel a lot of companies would have to would have to would have to put in their HR organization as well. Because again, the data scientists will help HR to specifically identify the goals that they wanted to get out of it, and only then that you're going to be able to know exactly what type of AI technology you wanted to deploy.
Yeah, very good. Kirsty, Elizabeth, anything to share on this one? Like, how do
I
you
guess,
actually
I guess,
get the business to invest is probably where I'm sort of coming from. How do I, as a HR professional, really show that we're over ahead of the pack or we're behind the pack about where we are in our journey to implement AI and people analytics?
I think of this as a moving target just because this is so every day I feel like technology is shifting so fast that there is no silver bullet in this. It is really what your organization defines as success. In addition, watching how this is going to play out with laws changing, court hearings, you know, all those different pieces are going to also kind of dictate or start to dictate how we're going to measure this. But none of that's really been defined yet. So it's really maybe just asking yourself as an organization, hey, what are we really trying to get out of here? And again, asking those like question about 7 times, why do we need to do this? Getting down to that root and then discovering, okay, this is the metric we need to track, whether it's utilization or, a certain target number, index number that helps you define your particular piece in moving it forward.
Have you got anything on this one, Elizabeth?
No, I mean, I just echo their points. I absolutely agree.
No worries. All right. So, like, we've got like 6 minutes left. I guess one area I'd like to just focus on briefly is just how do we ensure that the AI actually that we implement is actually enhancing the employee satisfaction, their welfare, rather than just optimizing it about business outcomes. Like, there's always a balance on both. Like, ideally they'd be the same, but they're not always the same. So how do we, tilt it that it's really about helping our workforce? And
I
yeah, go on, Kirsty.
I think one of that is getting into statistics, right? So you're taking this data, this chatbot or whatever utilization for AI, and then turning around and seeing if that anywhere correlates to employee satisfaction. So there's going to be several different data points and understanding anything. And of course, remember, correlation does not mean causation, but understanding how they tie together, that you're seeing this piece is actually enhancing their experience, would be my thoughts on that.
Yeah. Thanks, Kirsty.
Yeah, just adding to that around disengagement, if we're getting metrics and feedback from our employees about disengagement, if you then bring that back to the kind of forward thinking, if we can say to our employees, we noticed that and we're going to be doing that's at a very simplistic, basic level. What a great way for employees to understand that by putting this data in, we're getting it out and responding to it. But just on a behavioral sense, as a HR leader, we have to make sure we're repeating the communication and talking about it. So, we can't just say, oh yeah, we'll get on with that and go and do it. You need to stand up and tell everybody what you've done. And so people are reminded and they understand and they know that you are taking the action. You've got to walk the walk as well as talk the talk. But for me, that's a really great way of employees seeing the feedback and experiencing action being taken as a result of it.
And Bo?
Maybe to measure the impact of whatever you've deployed, the impact of it on the employees is still get their sentiments. Like, I personally feel that getting that employee opinion survey will stay. I don't think AI will replace that. What I can see though is that employee opinion survey will evolve into something that will be driven by AI. What I'm trying to say is still get their sentiments, but at this time, let's be creative in deploying it or asking those questions in such a way that we can encourage a more candid response from our employees. Because what I've seen from a lot of employee opinion survey was that you got 34 questions and you're asking your employees to answer the 34 questions in one sitting. I think that must change. If we can spread that 34 questions in a quarter, just so we can get the most candid response from our employees, that will be a lot better. And then apply machine learning out of it, that's going to be phenomenal. So employee opinion survey will stay. It's not going to be replaced by HR, but it will be improved by AI.
Yeah, I guess how I'd like to see it improved is, like, often employee surveys sort of happen once a year, whereas so much happens, that depends on how that person felt or what happened on that day. How do we get analytics that we can actually, get the pulse of the organization continually? Like, that'd be ideal to somehow be able to do that. But I guess we need the input to be able to do that. All right, we've only got a couple of minutes left, so I'll just ask each panelist just to share, like, what's one or two key suggestions you've got for the audience today. And we'll go counterclockwise, so we'll start with you, Kirsty.
I would say what everyone kind of reiterate what everyone's been saying is not to be afraid of AI as an HR professional. Think of AI as your personal assistant, the person that you've been looking, that ideal HR candidate that, hey, you can ask them just about any question. They can spit out answers or at least help guide you in that direction. That kind of changes your mindset in going into this area, and just getting a basic, again, technology, database management, statistical background will also help kind of relieve some of that fear and that uncertainty when you're going into this world.
Yeah. Thanks, Kirsty. Bo?
Well, to all of our HR friends here, now is our time. We're transitioning from an admin HR into a strategic HR through the help of AI. You've heard this from Microsoft. Don't be afraid with AI. AI is our co-pilot. So always look at it that way.
I like that co-pilot analogy. And Elizabeth?
I just give it a go. That's all I can say. Just don't be scared. Give it a go. And as I said earlier, if you're not sure, look at who's doing it and get them in and have a chat with you. It's going to cost you nothing except a bit of your time, and it could save a heck of a lot of time later. Be brave.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank the panelists and for everyone who's listening in to us today. It's been a very quick conversation once again. We've spoken about a lot. We've spoken, about the potential of HR analytics and AI. We've spoken about some of the challenges, and I think some of the challenges we spoke about is this common system thing is a key thing, so we actually get the right data that's available on everybody, and just all this ethical implications are quite key. But it has a lot of promise. There's no question it has lots of promise. So thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day. I'll be going to bed now. It's like 2 a.m. now, but all right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Okay.
everyone.
Yeah.